So I'm one of those long-time lurker, first-time poster people. Howdy. Anyway, a few years ago I, Welsh born and raised, ended up sharing university accommodation with Cassie, an American who had for some reason decided to attend Aberystwyth University. I'll spare you our long and colorful history along the path to becoming best friends. Suffice it to say, Cassie and I are pretty tight. Even now, years after leaving uni, and despite being on different sides of the Atlantic, we're still practically sisters. So when she invited me and my fiancé Jim to spend a week indulging in drunken shenanigans in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, who am I to say no? Cassie met us at the airport. She even had a board with our names on it, Blue and Jones. We almost sounded professional. From there, she whisked us out to meet a group of her friends. Her brother Kit, her girlfriend Rice, Alex, Jay, Craig, Curtis, and a pair of twins who looked like cheerleader stereotypes brought to life. One was Ruby and one was Topaz, but I lost track of which was which before we even got in the cars. One started out with a camera, but since they were passing it back and forth, that didn't help. Rice drove a minivan. Curtis had what he called a truck, cab up front, flatbed, that sort of thing. It was a pretty uneventful drive up, mostly just catching up on things with Cassie. The boys, apart from Jim and Kit, were in the truck. I'm assuming a minivan wasn't quite manly enough for them. We were getting pretty far out from civilization, eventually turning onto this narrow, gravelly trail through some real dense forest. Like I said, I'm Welsh, so a one-track road in the middle of nowhere didn't upset me. What did upset me was when Curtis suddenly slammed the brakes on up ahead. I didn't see what happened. I was in the middle of a hilarious anecdote when Rice suddenly stood on the brakes. We slid a little on the gravel before stopping, and by the time I looked out through the front windshield, the boys were already piling out of the truck, running around to the front. Naturally, we followed suit. "We hit a deer," Jay called back. "Motherfucker came out of nowhere." The twins let out matching cries of horror, and I did the same. My first glimpse of American wildlife, and it was splashed all over the bonnet of Curtis's truck. Still, I went up to take a look with the others, and it wasn't what I was expecting. I don't know how to describe what was wrong with the deer. There was just something about it which didn't quite look right, you know? Like something about the angle of the legs, or the shape of its antlers, or even just the way its eyes sat in its head. I mentioned this, and though a second before I swear everyone had been looking just as unsettled as I felt, they all started laughing. What did I know about white-tailed deer after all? Especially one which had been hit by a car. Of course it wouldn't look right. Besides, maybe it had a birth defect, or old injuries that hadn't set right. Maybe it had been slightly mutated by pollutants. Everyone had a reason for why I was wrong. Craig and Jay both know how to butcher a carcass, apparently. "Remind me again why we're going into the woods with these people?" Jim whispered to me. And since we were on Cassie and Kit's private property, there was no reason to let Bambi lay by the side of the road and rot. Curtis's truck was, miraculously, still drivable, so off we headed. The place was your typical quaint little log cabin, set dead center in a circle of green lawn. Around the edge of the lawn was this circle of stones, only about a foot high, set 2 or 3 feet apart from each other. They looked almost like a boundary marker, and Kit said that's what they'd used them for when they were visiting the cabin as kids. Their grandfather let them play outside unsupervised all they liked, so long as they stayed on the house side of the stones. I can see why, too. Even discounting the deer stop, it had taken us about 2 hours to drive out here, dense forest stretching away on every side. Thinking about a child wandering off into all that made me shiver. We took the rest of the day to settle in, and that evening the boys presented us with a fire pit. We were having a cookout, involving not just the barbecue stuff we brought with us, but also fresh venison steaks. I couldn't stomach eating the deer. I don't even know if it's because of the wrongness of it, or if it was just the memory of it being wrapped around Curtis's truck. I did have a few drinks though, and we were all getting nicely into the groove when we heard it. Another party, somewhere off in the distance. Like I said, this is private land, acres and acres of it. Anyone out here who isn't us is trespassing. Cassie was pissed off, but Kit was already pretty drunk and he kicked right off. Suddenly, he's got a rifle, and we're all marching out into the woods towards this group of other people, with me just stumbling along in the back, clutching Jim's hand and praying my first visit to America doesn't end with me burying a dozen bodies in the fucking woods. Luckily, sort of, we never found the people making the noise. It seemed to fade in and out, not like it was being blown on the wind, more like someone turning the volume knob on a radio or something. Eventually, Jay pointed out that all we were doing was getting ourselves lost in the woods, especially since by this point it was fully dark. We all agreed, and as we did, the sounds stopped, just like that, as if someone had finally switched the radio off altogether. We were all in a rough circle at this point, and I'd ended up alone, slightly away from the others. I was sighing in relief at not having to cover for a multiple homicide when I heard branches crackling in the trees behind me. It sounded huge, but before I could turn around, it was right there, right behind me. So close, I could feel its breath on my neck. So close, if I reached out backwards, I could touch it. I tried to call the others, but the smell of musty fur and carrion was so strong it came out as more of a retch instead. That still got their attention. They turned to me, and despite the terror on their faces, nobody screamed. It's funny how it's possible to be so scared you just turn into a useless statue. My head was screaming for me to run, but my body had apparently decided to play that shit like I was facing a T-Rex. "What is it?" I managed to gasp eventually. No one answered at first. I don't think they could. Finally, though, Cassie managed to grit out 3 words. "Emily, don't look." Seriously. Whatever it was, it reacted to my speaking. I felt movement behind me, and suddenly that hot, stinking breath was right by my ear. At the same time, I felt a gentle pressure on my shoulder, as if it was resting a paw or chin there. I expected it to bite me at any second. What I didn't expect was for it to start whispering to me. I don't remember anything it said. I think my brain just stopped functioning at that point, like it couldn't handle anything else and had just given up and gone to sleep. I felt drugged, useless. I just stood there and let the whispering wash over me like I'd already given up. I don't know what would have happened next without Kit. The sludgy daze I'd been in was blown apart by the loudest sound I'd ever heard, which I later realized was Kit shooting into the air. The whispering stopped, the hot breath receded, and suddenly everyone was screaming for me to run, and whatever else you do, don't look back. I didn't look back. I did, however, look up. That got me moving. It had antlers. Fucking antlers. I couldn't make out any features through the thick hair all over it, except its eyes. They were glowing, milky white, like twin moons hanging over me, and teeth. I definitely saw teeth. They all followed me. Kit and some of the other guys eventually caught up to me, then passed me. Behind me, I heard the sound of something huge and heavy crashing through the trees, and then the shrieking of one of the twins. She tripped on a branch and twisted her ankle, because apparently she decided that now was the time to take a leaf out of the horror movie handbook. Her sister was screaming after us, saying we had to stay and help. Then, distantly, they both started howling like people being torn apart. The rest of us made it safely into the house, locking the door behind us. Do I feel bad about leaving the twins? I'd love to tell you yes. But no, I didn't. Not even a bit. It's not like I twisted her leg, is it? It's not like they'd have come back for me or Jim. So why should I feel bad about it? Shut up. It all turned out to be a moot point anyway. We kept people on guard for the rest of the night, watching the edge of the woods. Obviously, they do get reception out here, but it's seriously not reliable. Plus, I dropped my phone out there somewhere. Still, at 3 a.m., Craig wakes us all up. The twins are outside, he says. No one believed him at first, not after the screaming. But no, there they were, waiting at the door. They were smiling and looked exactly as they did earlier in the evening. Now, they said the thing we saw was a costume, worn by some Mikey guy, who apparently couldn't make it up this week. He could, however, make it up for one night to scare the shit out of us, apparently, before heading back to civilization without speaking to anyone else. Everyone accepted this without question and headed to bed, but it was light before I could get to sleep. Am I nuts or what? The idea of one guy bringing himself up here, luring us into the woods, pulling that shit, and then vanishing back to society in time for work just didn't sit right with me. Then again, what's the alternative? Seriously, what? Evil ghost deer? Hulked out Bambi's dad? Elementary, my dear Watson? I wanted to go home this morning once I'd actually grabbed a few hours of sleep, but Cassie and Jim managed to talk me out of it. It doesn't help that the twins are supremely pissed off that we left them to die last night. Oh, they say they're not, but that doesn't stop them staring at people when they're not looking. I've caught them looking at me more than once today, turned around to see those totally blank expressions, suddenly twisting into beaming fake smiles before they turn and walk away. If they're pissed off, I'd rather them just say so. Worse, I'm pretty sure they've got something similar cooked up for tonight. Jim keeps saying he can't hear anything, but while I've been writing this out, typing away on the laptop he told me not to bring, hoping to catch the barest smidgen of reception, I swear I've started hearing people calling my name out in the trees, just beyond the boundary ring. So, I suppose my question to you, my fellow Redditors, is this. Should I stay or should I go?